below the earth's surface we have layers of rocks and we call them as plates. Especially construction, mining, construction of dam and reservoirs in areas known to be active with seismic zones. This wave can move through the solid rocks and fluids also it can move. What exactly are cyclones? Cyclone is a region where there is low atmospheric pressure in the center and shakes the ground. This is much stronger also, and it shakes the ground up and down, front and Hello my dear students, welcome back to session 3 on the chapter Human, Communities and Environment. Today we'll be learning about earthquakes and cyclones. What are earthquakes? We all have heard about earthquakes, isn't it? So what exactly are earthquakes and how is it formed? We shall learn today. An earthquake occurs when the rocks break and slip along the fault in the earth. The earthquake occurs due to the deformation of the crust and the upper mantle of the earth. So we have the earth, okay, and we have the crust and we have the upper mantle. In this they have a certain deformation, that is below the earth's surface I am talking about, the crust and the upper mantle. If there are some deformations, earthquake can be formed. Now as we know, below the earth's surface we have layers of rocks and we call them as plates, okay. Now due to the heating and cooling of the rocks below the plates, the movement of adjacently overlying plates and a great stress of deformation occurs. So what happens, because there is heating and cooling which is happening in the rocks just below these plates which is there in the crust, what happens is there is lot of stress which is built up. There is lot of energy which has been accumulated, and when the energy accumulated is above the strength of these rocks, okay, or these plates, what exactly happens? The entire rock will shatter and then there is a deformation in the entire earth's crust which is happening, which we call it as the earthquake, okay. So the tremendous energy build up between the neighboring plates, and if accumulated stress or energy exceeds the strength of the rocks, the rock breaks suddenly and releases the stored energy, and that is called as an earthquake. So due to the heating and cooling, there's a lot of energy which is there, which is stored in these, below the earth's crust, and when the rocks cannot withstand that stress and that energy, they will shatter, and that we call it as the earthquake. Further, during this earthquake, I told you there is energy which is released, isn't it? That energy released is in the form of waves, and that radiates from the epicenter in all the direction. Now what is this epicenter? Below the earth's crust, where exactly the focus point is, where exactly the stress or the heating, cooling, all that is occurring, okay, below the earth's crust. So just above that, in the earth's surface, that position is called as the epicenter. From the epicenter, the energy is radiated in the form of waves, which we call it as the earthquake. And these waves can be of 3 types. First one is the P wave or the primary wave, okay. That is a small wave, primary wave. There is no much deformities. It's not very strong wave, we can tell. They have alternate compression and expanse material in the same direction of their traveling. So if they are traveling in the same direction, there is a compression and depression which will happen to the material. This wave can move through the solid rocks and fluids also it can move. The second type of a wave is called as the S wave or the secondary wave. This is slower and shakes the ground. This is much stronger also, and it shakes the ground up and down, front and behind, okay. So it shakes the ground up and down, back and forth, perpendicular to the direction in which they are moving, okay. So if this is the direction of the wave which they are moving, so perpendicular to that direction, okay, they will move the earth up and down, back and forth continuously, and they can cause all the destruction. Okay. So surface wave follow both P and S wave, and the much stronger wave, we call it as the L wave, which can cause a lot of destruction. They will continuously, they are much stronger, and you can see they are flowing in this way. Whatever is there on the earth's crust completely shatters. Any building or anything which is there will just shatter during these earthquakes. Okay. The magnitude of the earthquake is measured with Richter scale. Okay. So that is about the earthquake. Next, what are the effects of an earthquake? That is more important for us, isn't it? So ground shaking, liquefaction of the ground, that is completely shattering of the ground or opening up of the ground, I can tell. Ground displacement, everything is there, just displaced here and there. There are landslides, there can be flood, there can be fire, as well as tsunami, which can occur because of earthquake. Okay. Next, how do we control earthquake? What are the measures which we can take to control earthquake? There are virtually no technique to control the occurrence of earthquake. No technique at all. However, certain preventive measures can be taken. Okay. What are the preventive measures that we can take to minimize the damage? Minimizing development activity, especially construction, mining, construction of dam and reservoirs in areas known to be active with seismic zones. Seismic zones are those zones in which they are prone to earthquakes, we can tell. Okay. So there, when we know that area is prone to earthquakes, there the construction work should not be taking place at all. Okay. Or at least minimizing that is very important. Continuous monitoring of the seismic activity using seismographs and alerting people regarding any recorded disturbance in advance. That is, you have to keep the people alert. Okay. Whenever there is a change in the seismograph where there can be an alert given to the earthquake, people should get to know that very quickly so that the damage can be minimized. Okay. So that's about the control of earthquake. Next is about the cyclones. What exactly are cyclones? Cyclone is a region where there is low atmospheric pressure in the center and it is surrounded by the high atmospheric pressure, resulting in swirling atmospheric disturbance. There is, in center there is low atmospheric pressure, around there is high atmospheric pressure, due to which there is a swirling of the atmosphere which can take place, or the swirling disturbance in the atmosphere can take place, which we call them as cyclones. Okay. Here the wind is blowing in anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere. Anti-clockwise means what? See, this direction when it is moving, it is clockwise. Okay. And this happens in the southern hemisphere. Anti-clockwise is in this direction. So the wind is blowing in anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. Along with the low and high atmospheric pressure, the swirling disturbance which is caused, we call it as the cyclone. They occur mainly in the tropical and in the temperate regions of the world, and cyclones are called by various names in different parts of the world. Cyclones are called by various names in different parts of the world, like it can be called as hurricane, it can be called as typhoon, okay, or it is also called as cyclones in India. So different names are given in different parts of the world. Indian cyclones vary in frequency in various parts of the world, and the 7,516 kilometers along Indian coastline is the Earth's most cyclone battered stretch of the world. So along the Indian coastline, we can see there is, here you can see the Indian coastline, how it is, for so many kilometers, 7,516 kilometers long, it is cyclone battered area of the world, we can tell. And around 8% of the total land area in India is prone to cyclone. About 2/3 of the cyclone that occur in Indian coastline occur in Bay of Bengal. So in the Bay of Bengal, we have maximum amount of the cyclones which is coming to India and affecting our climate as well. The states which are generally affected in the east coast are West Bengal, Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and on the west coast are Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka and Kerala. So these are almost on these two ends what we can see in Indian map. All the coastline, whatever is there, the states, all these are affected by cyclones. Warning, low pressure and the development can be detected hours or days before it causes, especially those in the sea, port authorities, commercial aviation and government machinery. So they can give us a warning about the cyclone which is going to come. Okay. Next is the typical adverse effects of cyclone. The first adverse effect, if we see, it is physical damage. Physical damage to the structures. Okay. The structures will be damaged or destroyed by the wind force, flooding and storm surge. Light pitched roofs or most of the structures, especially the ones fitted in the industrial buildings, will suffer severe damage. You can see, we have seen sometimes the roof is just flown off. Okay, it is just going with the wind. All that will happen during a cyclone. Second thing is casualties and public health. Because of the flooding and because of the wind blowing in a very strong storms which is coming, this is going to contaminate the water and there can be a outbreak of diarrhea or malaria or any other disease because of the contamination of water by flooding. Next is water supplies. The ground and pipe water supplies can be contaminated by the flood water and due to which again there can be outbreak of any of the disease. Crops and food supplies. High wind and rain ruin the standing crops and the food stock lying in the low-lying areas, and plantation type crops such as banana, coconut are extremely vulnerable. Salt from the seawater may get deposited on the agricultural land, increasing the salinity of the soil, and the loss of crop may lead to acute food shortage because of the cyclones. Next, communication. Severe disruption of the communication links, as the wind may bring down the electricity and the communication towers, for telephone poles, telephone lines, antennas, satellite dish, broadcasting devices, transport lines, that is roads, rails may be curtailed. Lack of proper communication affects the effective distribution of the relief materials as well. So because of cyclones, we can see there is no phone connections which is there, the satellite is not working, the broadcasting services are not working properly, the rails are closed, the flights are not there. Now there are so much disturbance which can be created because of cyclones, isn't it? So these are some of the adverse effects which is there because of the cyclone. So what is the possible risk reduction measures which we can take? The coastal belt plantation. The green belt plantation along the coastal line is a scientific interweaving pattern can reduce the coastal belt plantation. In the coastal, there can be plantation or there should be forest which can actually act as the wide buffer zone against the cyclones. That is, in the coastal belt, the plantations are in the form of, tall trees, or there is a lot of forest area which is there. They will not allow the cyclone to just come into the inlands. They will act like a buffer zone where the cyclone, the wind speed can be reduced because of the tall trees and the thick trees or forest which is there, and the inland area can be saved from lot of damage. Okay. The lack of protective forest covers allows the water to inundate large areas and cause destruction. With the loss of forest cover, each consecutive cyclone can penetrate further inland. So if there is a plantation which is taken in the coastline, okay, which is done in the coastal line, or the forest area which is there, preserved in the coastal line, then we can save ourselves from the lot of damage which can be occurred due to the cyclones. Next is hazard mapping. The meteorological records of the wind speed and the direction gives the probability of the wind in the region. So we can get a particular, warning or alert before the cyclone is coming. So I hope you have understood about the earthquakes as well as the cyclones. Thank you, my dear children. Stay tuned for more updates.